Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Chulin daf Yud Tes. We are going to begin on Yud Tes Amud Aleph, about 12 lines from the top. Rav Huna. So we ended up saying that the halacha of how far you can actually do the shechita is from the shipui kova downward. So the shipui kova, as we saw in this book, which we're going to be using throughout this Masechta, we will look at this picture on the top, and you can see that there are different parts. We have the, first of all, this is the kana, which is the windpipe or the trachea. Now, all the way down, we have what's called the tabois. Now, the tabois is questionable, as we saw, because they don't completely go in a complete circle. Rather, they're more like a U shape. And there's a question about doing the shechita in this area. The tabas hagadola, which is this section, this is something in which we say is where the makam shechita is. And we're going to see that based on the Mishnah, there was a machlokes. What if you cut the majority of the tabas hagadola, but then the rest was higher up? So our Mishnah mentioned a machlokas. We're going to explain today that perhaps that this is not so simple, that you just did the majority of the shechita of the tabas hagadola, and the machlokas is the small part after the majority has already been cut properly. Now, as I mentioned, the shipui koiva, which is called the slope of the thyroid cartilage. Its shipui is like a slope. So as you can see, the kana has this sloping effect, and therefore we allow you to even do the shechita up until this point. However, beyond that, no. Even though we did see a shitas yachid, I believe it was Reish Lakish, that said even the chuda, the kaiva, the roof of the thyroid cartilage, even the roof was allowed. That's really far up, we said. That's seemingly way beyond what's allowed. But the shipui koiva here, so one could shecht in this area, and that would be fine. But we're going to be focusing our attention on the tabas hagadola. Again, looking at this picture, this is what we'll be focused on. So we're not going to be referring back and forth to this picture anymore, at least for today. That's all we really need for this upcoming daf. So, with that said, let's see the Gemara. Rav Huna Amar Rav Asi. The machlokas in our Mishnah is b'sheshachat shnei shlish, that you shechted 2/3 of the tabas hagadola, which is the right place. Now, of course, 2/3 is the majority. That's 66%. The higrim shlish, and then you did hagrama. Hagrama doesn't mean that, hagrama means it's not a good shechita. It means that the hagrama means it's a place which is not the makam shechita. So you end up doing the makam shechita properly for the first 2/3, but the last third not. In this is the machlokas. The Rabbanan Sari kula shechita be'inon, but tabas hagadola, as we saw in yesterday's daf, based on Rashi, it's a halacha Moshe Sinai. Even though you would think that we should say ruba kakula, halacha Moshe Sinai requires the whole thing to be cut properly. That we hold ruba kakulo, and therefore it is fine because you did the first, the majority of it properly. So that's the machlokas in our Mishnah. Aval higrim shlish v'shachar shnei shlish divrei hakol psul. However, let's say you start off too high, above the tabas hagadola, and then only afterwards you did the second third and the last third properly. Everyone holds that's not good, because the nafka chiyusa be'inan ruba b'shchita v'leika, because it's necessary, really, seemingly, at least up until this point, the ikr is the beginning until rov, because all you need to do is technically cut the rov of both simanim, and that's good enough. So if you already did a third improperly, so then that's not going to be good. It doesn't matter that you did rov properly, because it depends on where that majority was. If you started off right, it's better than starting off wrong. Okay. Anyway, And of course, that is an interesting analogy in life, right? You could say, well, what's the difference? We did the same thing, but it's the way you start. It's got to start the proper way. So that's the machlokis, is when it was done properly, the first 2/3, but if it was done hagrama first, not. So Rav Chisda Rabbi Pofakert. Lema Mar Ibchum Machlokis. Maybe it should be the other way around. What's that? The machlokis is Geshehigrim Shlish of Shachat Shnei Shlish. Really, not that everyone holds its puzzle, but if you did the first third improperly, it's still possibly good. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, Midi have a Chatzi Kana Pogum. He says it's the same thing as this idea of Chatzi Kana Pogum. If you found half of the windpipe was pogum, says Rashi. So we're going to see later on Daf Chav Tes that Hari Shahoy Chatzi Kana Pogum Me'elav. Let's say you found it already half cut, the Hoisavel of Koshu, and all you did was add a small nick afterwards. Megamru Shchita Sukshera. So all you did was, it was already half cut before the Shchita, so it's kosher. So too over here. So what's the difference? If nothing was done, it would just happen to be halfway done, all it has to be is that the crossing over to get to Rove is enough, is all you need. So over here, wasn't half, was only a third, right? Maybe even if a half would be the din, but certainly if it's only a third of hagrama, and then the second half, or seemingly the second half is the most important part, the second half you did at that moment, within the second half is Rove, is the 51% threshold. So at that point, it should be fine. And that's why maybe he would hold it's okay. Rabban says, no. Hasa makam shchita, hachama makam shchita. There's a huge difference. When we talked about the case of Chatzi Kana Pogum, at least, even though it was found that way, but it was found in the right place, as opposed to here, the hagrama was in the wrong place. However, if you did the first 2/3 properly, so everyone holds Ruba Kakula, so it's fine. Okay. So the rove of one of the simanim is like the whole thing. And there it says Rashi, Vimo Shachat El Reva Simon, the very important Rashi. If let's say you didn't do anything, you did 2/3 of the shechita and you stopped, you didn't cut the last third, so v'holachloi, and you walked away, it's kosher, it's kshera. Al maruba kakula, l'inyan hagramanami haskash beruba masnizin hatani malechot. Okay, limuti higrim shlish tchila kasi. Maybe it's only an issue if it was done first. Lo limuti heicha da agrama b'sayif, not at the end, because it doesn't make any sense. If ruba kakulo, so then what's the difference if you do nothing as opposed to you doing hagrama? It's already shechted properly up until rove. So who cares that the last third is not done properly? You don't have to do it at all. As we'll see that language also on Chav Zayin. So I'm Rabbi Yosef. Man nemelan dahu ruba the hasam lav Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda Katanila. Don't Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda Katanila. How do we know that when he said the statement, maybe it's the Shitas Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda that says that statement, right? How do we know that the Rabbanan agree on that? So Amrle Abai ought to what? Kol Ruba the Alma Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda Katanila. Well, every time we talk about Rove, it's only a Das Yachid. Everyone knows there's a concept, Ruba Kakulo. So we're talking about everyone. So Amrle Anah, I'm referring to Ruba de Shchita Kamina. When it says Rove specifically by Shchita, Kamina. The Shamanulahu de Pligi, because we know that there's some type of a machlokus over here. So possibly it's only his Shita that says this. Lishnachrina. Another. So now let's go to the second lashon. So Armila Aimer Rav Huna Aimer Rav Asi machlokus kishigrim shlish v'shachat shnei shlish. The machlokis is if you did it improperly at first. And just like as if you would have found it already half cut, you just have to do a small amount, that's enough, so to here it's fine. Rabbanan says no, that's not the same, because Hasam over there by if you found Chatzi Kana Pogum, it's Makam Shchita. At least it was done in the right place. Hachala Makam Shchita. If you ended off doing the bottom, the end, not probably emeralds, it's good. So Maskim Rav Chisda Man Leimalan Dehu Ruba the Hasam Lav Yosef Rabbi Huda Katani Law Dim Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda Katani Law. Again, same question. So Rabbi Yosef Atu what? Kol Ruba the Alma Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Huda Katani Law. Well, who? It's only the only time we talk about robe is only him? No, it's talking about everyone. Rabbi Anna Ruba the Shchita Kamina. The Shemana Lahuda Pligi. Okay. So far so good. Okay, now let's continue. Now what happens if Higrim Shlish, which we said, let's say according to one Lashon, if you did Hagrama first, and then you did the Shechita properly for the last 2/3, so at least Rabbi Yosef Yehuda would say it's good. Because during the middle part was done properly when you got to cross the threshold of Rov. So the question is, why then is it necessary to be that the last third yet you did Hagrama, that you did the proper Shechita? Maybe this. Higrim Shlish v'shachat Shlish v'higrim Shlish. What's the din there? So Rav Huna Omer Rab Ksheira. So he would say that according to his Shita would be good. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rab Treifa. That this would be considered to be a Treifa. Now, Rav Huna Omer Rab Ksheira Kikina Fichayusa B'Shchita Kanafka. Because the whole point is at that moment, and that moment is the middle part. So therefore, as long as the middle part was done with properly, that's okay. Yehuda Eimer Rav Treifa Be'inan Ruba B'Shchita V'Leika. Okay, it's true that when you did the majority, that 51, when you hit the 51%, you were doing Shchita, but you also need to have Rov Shchita. Just like if you did Rov Shchita, the first 2/3, and then you stop, that's good. So you'll have to have Rov of the cutting has to be done properly. So even though it's true, the middle part you had hit the 51% threshold, but the Metzias is it's not attaching to a Shechita before or afterwards, to the first or third or last third. Okay. And then the Gemara asks another question. Shachat Shlish v'higrim Shlish v'shachat Shlish. So here you have the Shechita of 2/3, but the problem is that in the middle is the problem, because the middle you did Hagrama. So Yehuda Omer Rav Ksheira, he says it's kosher. Also Shalu Rav Huna Omer Hu Treifa. So Shem Rabbi Yehuda heard this, and Ikbid, Rabbi Yehuda, who said that it's kosher, he was shocked. How is it possible you could say this case is Treifa? Ikbid Omer Tarifna Umachsher Umachsherena Tarif. So I don't understand. So I, Rabbi Yehuda, when it was a case of Shechita in the middle, I was strict and said it was treif, and you disagreed with me. So now, when we do the Shechit, when we do Hagrama in the middle, in which I hold it's okay because the rove of it was done b'Shechita, now I'm saying you're going to disagree with me. So Rabbi Huna Shaberka Mikbud. It makes sense that you're upset. Chada iu shemil himine the Rav. First of all, you heard the name of Rav. Yana lo shmili, and I didn't hear it from him. Vo de ikaruba b'Shechita, and like you, though your logic of why it should work is we don't care that the middle is Hagrama, we care that the rove was Shechita, and therefore the first third, the last third was Shechita should not be good. So really, Rav Chisda lo tahaderbach. Do not retract as we continue to your Testament base. Because then you're going to end up losing out on the first part as well. So even though it's true, maybe the last case, this case we're talking about, where it's Shechita, Hagrama Shechita, that maybe you should be Chayzer because the majority was Shechita, don't retract, because people are going to then say the same thing when it comes to the Reisha, where you did Hagrama Shechita and Hagrama, that you would also retract. So Hasamai time, Kamech Sharta. So why was it kosher? Dechi nafka chiyusa b'achshera kanafka. Because at the 51%, at the middle part, it was done properly. So hachinam ki nafka chiyusa b'agrama kanafka. And during the middle part, it was hagrama. It's true. The first third, last third was shchita, but the middle, during the time which it hit the 51% point, from 50 to 51, it was not being done properly, and therefore it's not good, according to me. Ikar Rav Nachman Tzura. So he went to Rav Nachman to Tzura. Bo minei, question was posed. Shachat shlish v'higrim shlish v'shachat shlish ma'u. So which was our case. You did 2/3 of it was shchita, but the middle part, which the middle seems like the ikar, that was not done properly. So who lav hanu Rebbe Lezer Rabbi ben Yomi? Isn't that the statement of him? Diam Rebbe Lezer ben Yomi shchita hasui kemisra kshera. A shchita which is done like a comb is kosher. So what does that mean? Says Rashi, is this not Rebbe Lezer v'chulu? That this shchita has like teeth, right? In other words, it's not like done straight as like one action. It's broken up into different parts like a comb, and yet he says it's good. Maybe we're talking at least when it was done in that way. If it was all done b'makom shchita, it's okay. It says Rashi, "Hu dekam machshir b'hagrama chutz l'makom shchita lo machshir." So, but if it's an issue of hagrama, so then it's not okay. However, when he says if you do it to kimisarik, like a comb, so then it is okay. All right, because at least it's b'makom shchita. So b'makom shchita ma'ilo memra. Ma'adatema bi'ina, if it was done properly in the right place, so what's the chiddush? Of course it's good. Ma'adatema bi'ina shchita mifuras v'leika kamashmon. You would think you need, says Rashi, Megula v'nichras, that it has to be recognizable. Okay. Simin b'chad. Yosef Rav Abba, so this is the Beis, is the Abba. Achuri the Rav Kahana, which is the Chafin b'chad. The Yosef Rav Kahana came to Rav Yehuda, which is the Daled. Yosef Kaimer Shachat Shlish v'Higam Shlish v'Shachat Shlish. So again, our case, you did the shchita for the majority, but the hagram was in the middle, ma'u. So malay shchita so ksher, it's good because again we focus on the middle part. So higam shlish v'shachar shlish v'higam shlish. So let's say you only did the shchita, a third was in the middle. So ma'u malay shchita subsul, because we hold like Rabbi Yehuda that we go basar the majority as long as the majority is done with shchita. Shachar b'makam nekav ma'u. Let's say you shechted in a place which already had a previous hole. So says Rashi, Shahayu Chatzi Kana Pogum, but Sido Hachitzain. So, which sounds like we already talked about this. And on this, Taisa says, Taima Pshita Diksher, Midan Havi Chatzi Kana Pogum Begomru. So, if that's the case, we already established that if you would find it halfway already cut, half already open, and then all you do is add a mashu to get to the 51%, that's enough. Says Taisa, Yesh Lerma the low. Not the ella mishum deboy lemeboy achriti. So Taisa says you're right. It's not really a kasha. It's just based on a previous question. In order to get to the next question, let's say shachad upagbo nekev mahu. Not that you shechted b'makom nekev, but you shechted and you realized that there was a nekev. So what's the din in that situation? It says Rashi shoyichatzi. In other words, you did the shchita, and you up, let's say halfway, and then you notice that the second half has a hole in it. In that case, the shchita will not be good because we go buster the second half. So also, and there was no second half. So also Rabbi Abba Amar Kamedu Rabbi Lezer Armalei. Committee Rabbi Elazar, also Rabbi Elazar, and Amar Committee of Yochanan. Really, Maishna. So what's the difference between if it was shacha b'makam nekev, it's okay, but shacha b'pagma nekev, it's not okay. So Amalei shacha b'makam nekev. Why is it kosher? Because nasa kami sheshacha b'makam Yisrael. It's ki'u like an akum did the first part of the shchita, and then the yid completed it. So again, let's say the main part is the 51%, which is really the second half, the start of the second half. So if the Oy Chachamim did the first half, that's nothing, because the half alone is nothing, and therefore if you have even though an Oy Chachamim is not able to do the shchita, but he didn't accomplish a shchita, so therefore it's okay. However, shachar paga bo nekev, if let's say you did the first half and then you found the nekev for the second half, nasa kamisha shachar yishav gamar of a chachamim. It's ki'ilu like the yid did the first half and the akum did the second half and the akum made it into the rove. He made the 51%. And made it to 51%. That's the problem. So so he called upon him. So what does that mean? It says Rashi. It's not that he was calling him an Ovi Chachavim. But he was kind of like almost like making some type of levity. The reason why you're saying it depends if the hole was found was at the beginning or the end is connected to an Ovi Chachavim. The whole Hayamati Yachal Loim Ovi Chachavim Nein Hatamim Doimim. It's basically saying that it's not. I don't agree that that's a logical connection. That's what it means. Notice he disagrees with them. I can understand that why you feel that in this situation it's not the same. A person a yid who shechs the first half and akum does the second half, we understand why that's going to be possible. So the reality is the yid was supposed to do the whole shechita. He was supposed to get to the rove, the 51%, but he stopped before, and now the chachamim did it. So I understand why it's not good, because ki nafka chiyusa, when it left its life, which is after the rove, biyad of chachamim ka nafka, and therefore that's why it's not good. But when it comes to here, when you did the first half of shechita, and then you just found a hole afterwards, you did the proper shechita, so mali b'makam nekev, mali pagabo nekev. It shouldn't really make any difference, and therefore, according to this opinion, he would actually hold it should not matter. Okay, we're actually going to stop there. No questions for the regular deer shoot test. TA 17. No questions. TB 20. Shachad b'makam nekev shoychatzi kana pagum v'hiskil shom shchitaso o shachad upagum nekev madinoi. Let's see if I wrote the correct answer here. So shachad b'makam nekev shehu chatzi. It was already there. V'gomer hashchita shchita kashera. Good. What I write? Mash ein kain im pagamo nekev shehu shachad rak hachatzi harishon v'lo also hashchita ba'ofen hazeh upsul. Actually, I would say l'chad man da'omer. I don't think this is completely true, right? Because it says mali, right? Michti. So therefore, it shouldn't make any difference. So really, it should be l'chad man da'omer gam zeh kosher. So I would say, so this is a machlokas. Okay, so it's right. So it's a machlokas. That's what it sounds like. Okay, Adkan.